The story begins on a bright afternoon when several heroes are fighting against the Demon Lord. The Demon Lord is not the usual demon people could see, as he also looks like a human. The leader of the heroes, Xenard, lifts up his sword with the intention of killing the Demon Lord. His companion also used their magic power and they attacked the Demon Lord together. The Demon Lord is alone by himself. He bravely faced the hero's attack with just his sword and tried to block it. He was able to make it. But the heroes had a saintess with them and were casting strength on everyone. She blessed strong power to Xenard, and Xenard then struck an attack once again. It was so strong this time, and the Demon Lord was just standing, staring at its blinding light and believing that he wouldn't be able to block it. He was hit by this attack and the ground where he was standing had crumbled. The Demon Lord wondered if this would be his end, which is a fitting ending for him as a Demon Lord King. He was leaning on the rock and heard a noise near him. He slowly opened his eyes and saw the heroes standing in front of him. Xenard ordered everyone to get rid of the Demon Lord, as he was afraid that the Demon Lord would regain his power. He also believes that the Demon Lord cannot harm them this time, knowing that he is very weak now. At this moment, the Demon Lord King realizes that he isn't dead. Xenard was staring at him and he also did the same thing and smirked. Xenard addressed the Demon King Lord with the name Zeke Mower. He pointed his sword to Zeke and confidently said that he would list all the evil deeds of Zeke before he finished him off. According to him, Zeke took hundreds of lives of the Carwoodmen Order's Grail Knights and also took innocent lives. Zeke didn't deny it, but he was so annoyed listening to this man yapping at him. This hero added that he shall judge Zeke with the hand of justice for all those sins he has done. Everything he said is true, but he cannot hold himself, as it makes him more annoyed to hear it coming from Xenard. This time, he doesn't want to die from his hands, and luckily for him, he kept the fate-twisting key. With this, he believes he'll be able to stab Xenard one last time. With this blade that twists the fate of the target to change the future, although he doesn't know how his future will change. The hero knight lifted up his sword again and uttered Zeke's name. He slashed his sword at Zeke and was hoping that Zeke would become someone who would do good in his next life. Blood dripped on the ground, but Zeke remained alive. He even has the guts to answer that he will be good in his next life if given a chance, but not this time. The hero knight was shocked to see him unharmed. Zeke activated the power of the fate-twisting key while saying that there was something he had to do real quick, and that was to kill Xenard from his hands. A purple light emerges and Zeke throws away the fate-twisting key to his opponent. This key landed on the knight's chest and he grits his teeth as he feels unusual pain. He also wondered how Zeke had this key, but Zeke didn't answer and only said that the key had worked and would make the knight pissed as hell. Unfortunately, the knight managed to swing his sword and beheaded Zeke. He died much earlier than he wanted to, but he doesn't really have any regrets. A bird chirping outside a house. It was near the room of a young man who woke up because of the loud noise of the bird. He was so annoyed, but he suddenly flinched and wondered how he remained alive. He was none other than Zeke Mower in a young version of himself. He stared at his hands and breathed deeply. He gets down from his bed and looks at himself in the mirror. He was so confused since he freshly recalled that he got beaten up by the heroes, then listened to Xenard yapping away and used the fate-twisting key. He then concludes that it might be because of the key why he regressed. But his head hurt as he was trying to remember where he got the key. He was looking around his room and realized that he was still living with his family at this point in time. He was thinking of what he would do now that he had come back to the past, and he planned on finding the fate-twisting key first. One thing he was also thinking about was the reason why he left his family back then. At this moment, he feels like his memories are all tied up. While thinking, someone opened the door of his room. He was startled and annoyed by the fact that nobody knocked before barging in, despite the fact that he is a noble family's oldest son. But then he remembers that nobody, even servants, treated him like a noble. "You're still in your room, young master," the man who barged in said angrily. Zeke was staring at him, but he couldn't remember who this man was or if this man was a servant. But he was grateful that this man addressed him correctly. The servant is still mad and complains that Zeke always left at dawn and believes that he gave up. "You can't afford to be lazy right now, can you?" he added with crossed arms. Zeke sighed and ordered him to come near. The servant followed what he said and asked him why. Zeke only smiled at him for a few seconds, but the servant was annoyed and ordered him to speak immediately. Zeke then punches him in the face, which makes him vomit blood. His cheek was in pain and he got mad while asking Zeke what he had done. Zeke stood near him with a scary aura. The servant becomes afraid of him and wants to run away, but Zeke walks towards him, causing him to stumble and fall. Zeke then kicked him numerous times and he could not help himself but cry in pain. His blood splattered, but good thing that Zeke didn't kill him. He kneeled on the ground while crying and apologizes to Zeke, knowing that he was beaten up because of his rude behavior. Zeke was about to hit him again, but someone came and asked them what was going on. The servant then ran to the man that newly came and addressed him Mr. Biner. Biner is a knight with a broad body. The servant hit on his back while raising his middle finger to Zeke. Zeke doesn't like the rudeness of the servant at all, but he cannot beat him up again because of Biner. Biner ordered him to explain what was happening, and Zeke then asked him if this was how they should talk to him, with rudeness. "So what? Are you going to beat me up like you did to Hans?" Biner replied. Zeke smirked and answered, "Sure." He tapped Biner's shoulder and said that a bitch as a dog couldn't even recognize his owner needs a beating in order to lower his tail. "Do you think you can defeat me right now? You think you're that skilled?" Biner asked. Zeke then walked away from him and admitted that he couldn't win against Biner with his current body and skills. But for him, they shouldn't ignore the fact that he is their master and can possibly train an obedient dog. Biner was mad hearing from Zeke addressing him as a dog. He said that Zeke didn't know who he was. Zeke pulled the cover on the table and dropped it on the face of Biner. Hans, the servant, was shocked to see Zeke's behavior. Zeke then jumped towards Biner while holding a vase and hit it on his head. Biner fell down on the floor and collapsed. Zeke then uttered that being strong isn't everything in this world. He then glanced back to Hans and told him that they must finish what they had started earlier. Hans cannot move his body because of fear. Despite that he saw Zeke dashing toward him with a clenched fist, he still remained standing and screamed so loud the moment Zeke beat him up once more. Meanwhile, afternoon came, and Zeke was standing at the front hall door inside their house. Back in the past, he used to be so terrified of opening this tall door. But now, he realizes that there is nothing for him to be afraid of. He entered inside and saw his father, mother, brother, Hans, and Biner waiting for him. As he walked down the aisle, Biner was staring at him with anger. He then recalls what happened earlier when he woke up after Zeke beat him up. Before he went into this hall, Zeke's half-brother, Greg Steele, will talk to him, informing him that his father was disappointed in him for collapsing on the ground and being a disgrace to the Steelwell Knights. Greg lifts up his hand and lands it on the face of Biner, telling him that he didn't do anything wrong, so he should be confident. He also reminded Biner that their opponent here is none other than Zeke. Recalling it makes Biner mad and he wants revenge, but he cannot do it now. "You're late," Count Vordo Steelwell said, Zeke's father. Zeke then casually asked why he was called. Vordo was mad seeing Zeke being so impolite to him. He said that Zeke had forgotten how to greet others before anything else. "You're not going to accept it anyway. What's the point?" Zeke replied. "That rotten mind of yours. How are you going to succeed me as Count if you act like that? You're the main heir of Steelwell. At least make an effort," Count Vordo said. Zeke made a face and chuckled, then said that his father didn't actually think of giving him the title. Count Vordo becomes more furious at his way of talking. His wife was standing beside him. She was Florel Steelwell, Zeke's stepmother, and she said that she was right that Zeke was even ill-mannered. His son Greg sighed, and staring at them both made Zeke mad as he clearly remembered these two people who were very desperate to get one over him. He chuckled once more and bowed down in front of everyone while saying, "How could I ever be disrespectful and arrogant towards you? It's a misunderstanding." He glanced at Florel and called her mother. Florel doesn't like it at all, knowing that Zeke was just acting kind. Zeke then proudly said that he was grateful for Hans and Byron as he was invited to this hall because of the two. He said sorry to his father and turned around, walking towards the wall, and grabbed the sword. Everyone was shocked by his actions. Zeke then bravely pointed the sword to Hans and said that he would use this chance to finish this man off. Hans was in fear while asking for help from Florel. "How dare you point a sword at someone here?" Count Vordo said. And at the same time, Greg smirked as he thought that Zeke was a fool for having the guts to aim a sword at someone in front of their father. Of course, the neck of the person who humiliated the great Count Steelwell's rightful heir ought to be cut off. "Isn't that why you called me here?" Zeke replied to his father. Florel interfered by ordering Zeke to stop, and she don't believe that Hans humiliated him. Hans also swore that he was fakely accused by Zeke. Zeke struck the sword on the ground and claimed that Hans accused him of lying to his own father. Hans at this moment was thinking that he would really be killed by Zeke if he said the wrong thing, and even Florel would not be able to protect him. Zeke this time confirmed that Hans was Florel's person, which is why Hans was very rude to him. But one thing he was wondering is why would Florel go so far for Hans, a mere servant? Hans was about to say the truth, but he was surprised upon hearing Halt and Biner beside him saying that Zeke was lying. Zeke smiled at him, knowing that Biner was lying to defend Hans. Florel then went to Biner and asked if what he said was true, and Biner confidently answered yes. "Mr. Zeke unilaterally assaulted Hans and me," he declared. "How easy is it for a knight like you to say he got angle-handedly assaulted? Aren't you humiliated? Looks like you don't intend to admit your sins either, huh?" Zeke said. But still, Biner said that he had never told a lie. Zeke was still smiling at him, telling him that he still claimed innocence to the very end. He aimed the sword at Biner and challenged him to prove his innocence with his skills. Biner feels insulted and he believes Zeke is out of his mind. Count Vordo stood and Zeke then asked him, "Isn't that good from your point of view, father?" He also said that Byron can use this chance to completely get rid of him if he loses in this duel. Surprisingly, Count Vordo allowed a duel to happen. Byron smiled as he was very confident that he could defeat Zeke. Zeke was not scared at all. He even has the guts to widely smile and give thanks to his father for giving him the permit to have a duel against Byron. He then turned around while telling his father to decide the time and place on his own. Count Vordo was just planning on scolding his son Zeke a little and sending him back, but perhaps he concludes this could be a good excuse to pass on the Count title to Greg. Zeke put the sword back on the wall and told his father that he wanted to try changing himself now, as he realized that he would not be able to get what he wanted if he stayed the same as he was in the past. By what you want, do you mean the title of Count? Count Vordo asked. Zeke held on to the door and answered that his father wouldn't understand anything he would say now. He glanced back to his father and added that they would see each other again on the day of the duel. Currently, Zeke has the body of an 18-year-old. Thinking about his past, he can't deny how naive and weak he was. His father's attention was everything, yet he couldn't even learn swordsmanship properly since his father was reluctant to let him learn swordsmanship. The dormant existences that were great and destructive within him. Normally, the amount of mana a person has is innately determined, and compared to the average person, his mana is still poor. This time, he knew it was too much trying to go back to the mana he had when he was the Demon King. He also believes that there is no way that much mana, which is comparable to the mana of the dragon that disappeared, would awaken within him right at once. He even obtained the title Demon King of Power, and there were truly many hardships and trials. For him, it was to the point where it seemed like someone had planned for all those things that happened to him one after the other. He gets up from lying on the ground as he feels someone is spying on him. It was his brother Greg, and he ordered Greg to stop peeping and go away. Greg was shocked that Zeke was alarmed by his existence. He showed himself to Zeke and said that it seemed like Zeke awakened his mana. You don't think it's possible with just that level of skill, do you? He asked while walking toward Zeke. He mentioned the match against Zeke and Biner and asked Zeke why he does things that are unlike him. Just leave like how you did before, by reading the room. I'll look after you later so you don't feel, he added, but he stopped the moment he saw the scary aura of Zeke. Zeke then said that his brother Greg is scared that he'd take the position of Count away from him. Greg denied it and said that it was right for him to give up becoming the Count if he can't defeat the measly Zeke Steelwell. Zeke tapped his shoulder and said that he must do what his brother Greg wants, and that is succession to become Count. Let's see who'll win, like the family of warriors we are, he uttered. Greg pushes away his hand and concludes that it seems like Zeke suggesting that they should fight each other. So what if I am? Zeke asked, and Greg replied that there was no reason for him to refuse. Zeke then took his answer as a yes, and he walked away while telling his brother Greg that he would be the one to decide the time and place. After a few days, the day of the duel between Biner and Zeke had finally come. They were at the arena and lots of people were watching them. I've sincerely learned my lesson from you, young master. Now, it's time for me to teach you a lesson, Biner stated. He also added that Zeke would surely regret not wearing armor. Zeke was not listening to him. Instead, he was staring at his sword as he noticed that his sword is a little blunt. He then glanced at Biner, wondering what Biner was blabbering about. This time, the host asked them if they were both ready to battle. Biner then answered yes while Zeke only confidently smiled. The host then declared to begin the duel, and Biner then charged to Zeke. Zeke did the same thing and he was able to block Biner's sword. He then smirked and said, even if you are stupid, a knight is still a knight, ha. But deep down inside him, Biner's blow is heavier than he thought. Biner at the same time confirmed that Zeke had the ability now, which is why he's very confident to fight. He then smiled and lifted up his sword, then attacked Zeke numerous times while saying that Zeke could not defeat him if they fought fairly. Zeke was struggling to block Biner's sword. Unfortunately, he flew away since Biner used most of his strength. His sword was flaming and he swung it once more, but still, Zeke was able to block it, but he was really struggling to defeat Biner. Biner teasingly smiled at him as he knew Zeke was struggling. They continued the battle while the audience focused on watching them. Zeke still doesn't get a chance to swing his sword and all he does is block Biner's weapon. But his father's subordinates could see that he was fighting better than they expected for being able to block Biner's sword several times. Florel still believes that they were an advantage, and their subordinate agrees, knowing that Zeke has not properly learned swordsmanship after all. Florel was staring at her husband Vordo, but Vordo was not commenting at all. As expected, the crowd was so loud cheering only for Biner. They even wanted Biner to finish off Zeke as soon as possible. Biner hears the people and he teases Zeke. Zeke was trembling while blocking his opponent's attack. Biner swung his sword and told Zeke to surrender if he didn't want to get injured. Zeke's sword started flaming, which made Biner surprised. Zeke then told him that he had just started. Zeke was planning something, but he wasn't sure that it would work. Biner, on the other hand, was shocked to see Zeke activate a Sense Ecosystem sword skill. Byron felt danger this time, but he did his best to block it and the ground started to crumble. After releasing the skill, Zeke's hand trembles and realizes that his mana is going out of control and he cannot control it well. The people on the other hand were silent and they all couldn't believe what they had witnessed. Count Vordo's subordinate even said that Zeke used a skill that expands one's senses. Count Vordo was speechless knowing that his son used a skill that would match his sword and body through mana. His wife Florel was also dumbfounded as she never expected Zeke to have knowledge about sword technique. Seeing Seal had the ability made his opponent Biner annoyed and wondered when Zeke had learned sword technique. But he believes that Zeke's stance when using mana is poor and he even concludes that Zeke's body and mana are separate so Zeke cannot control it, so he is confident that his opponent is still the measly Zeke he knew. "Let's stop playing around now," Zeke uttered. He then charged at Zeke while his sword was flaming. He lifts up his sword and attacks Zeke using a sword technique. Zeke managed to dodge, which shocked Biner, but Biner's attack wasn't over yet. He casts another technique and he was sure this time that Zeke can't dodge it. Zeke grits his teeth as he knows Biner is right. It turned out that Biner used his strong technique, which is the space splash, and Zeke wasn't able to dodge it. Zeke slammed on the wall and he heard people cheering for his opponent Biner. "I believe the victor is already decided. How long do I have to keep doing this? Until the young master's life is at risk," Biner proudly said, and the people were cheering for his success. Not until Zeke struck his sword on the ground and tried to stand while admitting that he couldn't really win against Biner using his current body's technique. "But in battles, you fight for real," he added and charged towards Biner. Biner then glanced at him with annoyance. Zeke was carrying sand with his sword and he then swung it, causing Biner to be blinded by the sand. Zeke then seized the opportunity to hit Biner with his body and Biner flew away on the corner. Biner cleaned his eyes while saying that Zeke was acting like a coward. He was staring at Zeke who was walking towards him. His vision was blurry not until Zeke got near him and aimed the sword at his neck. "A coward, you say? Try using that to justify your defeat in an actual fight," Zeke stated. Biner was annoyed at him, but he knew he didn't have a chance now, so he declared that he surrendered. Zeke then told him that he was bound to lose because of his recklessness and arrogance, apprehension that he might end up killing the oldest son of the Steelwool family he served. He also said that if Biner won't forget today's battle, he will grow even further. The host was shocked hearing Biner concede defeat. The Crows and the Steelwool family are waiting for him to declare the winner. He then proclaimed that the winner of the duel was the young master, Zeke Steelwool. As expected, people weren't in favor of the result. All he heard from the crowd was that he was cheating. But he didn't care at all as long as he won the match against Biner. "When did Zeke learn magic technique? There's no way someone taught him," Count Vordo asked. "Count, haven't you caught on already? He's born with it," his subordinate replied, and hearing what he said made Greg tremble in anger. He cannot believe seeing his brother Zeke remain fine after being hit by Biner's space slash. He was overthinking, but he got startled the moment he heard Zeke's voice calling his name and challenged him to a duel. "I told you, didn't I, that I'll decide the time and place," Zeke uttered. That made Greg more furious at him. Their father was so confused about what Zeke was trying to say. "Are you going to act oblivious? I know you already agreed to it, father," Zeke replied. The people were gossiping after they confirmed that the rumors about the succession duel between Zeke and Greg were true, and they could not believe that it would also happen today. Some also said that Zeke is very confident in challenging Greg in his current state. "What are you doing, Greg? Get down here right now. It's almost as if you're scared," Zeke said. Greg didn't move at all, but his father beside him commanded him to get down and face Zeke. "Are you actually scared of Zeke when he's such a mess? Don't bring upon any further disgrace," Count Vordo said. And Greg then immediately went down to face Zeke. Seeing him being so obedient makes Zeke smile, which makes Greg wonder about why Zeke is smiling like a demon. Greg held his sword with both of his hands, and he can now say that everything to Zeke, including his expressions, tone, behavior, and even his combat abilities, is no longer the Zeke he knew. He didn't move for a moment, but he flinched upon hearing Zeke's voice uttered his name again. Zeke said that Greg remained standing, waiting for him to move first. "Then, as your older brother, I gotta go first," Zeke uttered while rushing to Greg. Greg was terrified. He was nervous, but he managed to block Zeke's sword. Zeke's sword was trembling and Greg noticed it. He believes that Zeke is not even exerting proper strength. This time, he becomes confident to fight against Zeke. He swings his sword and motivates himself that he is Greg, the successor or the title of the Count. Zeke was almost hit by Greg's attack. The wound Biner inflicted on him is no ordinary one, and because of it, he cannot use any more magic in his current state. To decide this match with his victory as quickly as possible is his only way after all. He chuckled while Greg was staring at him in confusion. Blood dripped on the ground. It was because Zeke squeezed Greg's sword barehandedly. "You ever heard of a bloody fight with flesh flying everywhere?" he asked. An azure flame started appearing while Zeke squeezed the sword of Greg with all his force until it got broken. Greg was jaw-dropping and never expected it from his brother Zeke. Zeke this time had a scary aura and he told Greg that he'd die right here right now if he would not surrender. Zeke lifts up his sword and beats his brother using the sword's pommel. Greg flew away and fell to the ground. Before he could stand, Zeke struck the sword near Greg's face and his aura became more scary. At this moment, Greg cried in fear and immediately conceded defeat. The host then went near them and declared that the winner of this duel was Zeke Steelwell once again. People were speechless and Greg was mad at himself. Zeke then glanced at his father and reminded him about his promise that the title of Count would go to the victor of the duel. His father was mad and proclaimed that the duel wasn't going to decide anything. The people were murmuring, wondering if Count Vordo would not keep his promise to his oldest son. At the same time, Zeke removed the glove in his hand that had a ring and said that he already anticipated this. He confidently said that he didn't want the title at all even once in his life. While saying it, he threw the ring to his father and it dropped on the ground where his father was seated. His father was staring at the ring. He was furious and stood to scold Zeke. Florel asked him to calm down but he didn't listen. "What the hell are you doing right now?" Count Vordo angrily asked. "What does it look like?" "I'm leaving the family out of my own volition," Zeke answered. He then called Greg, who is now assisted by his servant. Greg didn't glance at him but he still told his brother to remember the way to always win in a fight is it's to not fear death. For him, Greg should be stronger in order to protect the border territory of Steelwell, which is always in danger of invasion from foreign forces and everyone. Greg didn't respond at all. Zeke walked towards them and stole the healing potion the servant was holding. He then swallowed it and his wound slowly healed. He smiled slightly and was hoping that the Steelwell family wouldn't forget the lesson he taught them. Meanwhile, Zeke was standing outside the gate together with a man. He called this man his porter and it turned out it was Hans. A few hours later, Hans was singing at the mansion while walking, carrying a laundry basket, and heading to the lavatory. But then, he got to someone. It was too dark so he didn't see who it was. Zeke then said it was him, and he ordered Hans to come with him as his servant. Hans said okay at first but he was stuttering in confusion. "Why? You don't want to. If you don't want to, you can just die here after I cut you in half," Zeke said. He was about to unleash his sword but Hans declared that he would come. At the present time, Zeke threw his baga to Hans' face and ordered him to carry it. Hans doesn't have a choice but to obey his command as he is also afraid to run away. At this moment, Zeke forgave the servant who acted up against him in exchange for mere labor and he wondered if he was now a kind person for forgiving someone. He looked back to Hans and decided to help him strengthen his stamina and train him so that this man would be useful to him. "Call me Sir Zeke from now on," Zeke said, and Hans replied, "Yes, understood." He also asked what Zeke is planning for the future but Zeke said that he doesn't have a fixed plan. But for now, he was planning to go first to the neighboring territory of Porty. After that, just go where their feet take them. He was now determined to try living kindly in this life. As they arrived at the forest, Hans told him that the path they were following wasn't made for humans. But Zeke was aware of it. He informed Hans that if they go straight, they'll have to go less than half the distance so there's no reason for them to go around in circles and follow the path. Hans then answered that if they venture away from places where people leave, there are monsters roaming around. "That's exactly why we're here," Zeke stated, which scares Hans since he isn't capable of fighting beasts. All of a sudden, someone threw something into the bag Hans was carrying. Hans then turned his head around but he was already nervous at this point. He also heard a sound and was hoping that it was not a beast. He still followed Zeke while he kept turning his head around. He was praying that they get past this place as quickly as possible. Zeke suddenly paused and called Hans. Hans was confused and Zeke then told him that his test would start now. Zeke handed a sword to Hans and Hans was so clueless. He was not prepared at all and he was thinking that Zeke was just joking. Zeke then told him to look behind him and as he turned his head around, he screamed in fear as he saw a scary beast behind him. To be specific, the beast is a goblin. Hans was trembling and wanted to back out while calling Zeke's name. He informed Zeke that he didn't even know how to wield a sword. "Please at least give me a bigger sword." "What do you expect me to do with this?" Hans added, and Zeke replied, "You better be satisfied with that before I hand you a stick, or would a stick be better?" The goblin was staring mad at Hans then charged at Hans without any hesitation. The goblin is attacking Hans while Hans doesn't know what to do and only screams for help. Zeke was looking at him and was disappointed knowing that Hans had a long way to go if he decided to train him. At this moment, the goblin looked at him as he interfered. But Zeke easily punched the goblin, and the goblin was instantly knocked out. Hans, on the other hand, was lying on the grass after the goblin beating him. He gets up and asks Zeke why he's doing this to him. Zeke then honestly said that it was because Hans was too weak. He gets something in his pouch while telling Hans that he can't just carry his stuff around while he's with him. He handed the elixir to Hans and added that Hans had to at least train to protect himself. He then commanded Hans to use the elixir and get ready once again. According to him, he only knocked the goblin out but it'll wake back up in a while. Hans was nervous but he followed Zeke's command. An hour had passed and Hans spent lots of healing potions as he kept losing against the goblin. But, good thing that he now learned how to hold the sword and position himself. His enemy at this hour is still the goblin earlier. He then charged at the goblin without any fear as he was very determined to kill it with his hands. As he tried to attack the goblin, it was able to dodge and hit his arm. Hans grits his teeth as he tries to fight back. The goblin swung its armor and attacked Hans with it. Luckily, Hans was able to lower down his body and avoid the goblin's weapon. Zeke was surprised upon seeing that Hans dodged the goblin's attack. He then thinks that Hans might be talented but doesn't have enough training. Surprisingly, Hans was able to dash behind the goblin at a fast speed. The goblin was confused, trying to look at him. It turned out that Hans was already aiming his sword at the goblin. He then struck the goblin's head without any hesitation and it instantly died and fell on the ground in front of Hans. Hans looked at his hands and he was still surprised that he finally won. He screamed in excitement but he paused when Zeke went to him and handed him a healing potion. Hans then immediately drank it, then Zeke told him that it was beyond his expectation. Hans was so happy and gave thanks to Zeke. He believes that it was all because of Zeke who pushed him for him to be able to fight without any fear. All of a sudden, the potion dropped to the ground. They heard loud sounds and saw lots of goblins heading towards them. These goblins were mad at them for killing their companion. Zeke remained calm while Hans was nervous. Zeke looked at the ground and saw small rocks. He immediately picked it up and threw it to the goblins. He was able to hit the head of some of the goblins and he kept doing it until all the goblins died. Hans was sitting on the ground. He was so shocked, so Zeke told him that this was just the start. Hans is puzzled and doesn't know what Zeke is trying to say. Zeke then told him to look behind him so he could understand. Hans then saw another type of monsters, which are orcs, a scary one than the goblins. Zeke told him not to worry as he had plenty of potions, but still, Hans was terrified as he didn't know how to kill these lots of orcs. The night came and both of them managed to kill all the orcs who dared to attack them. Zeke lit up a fire while Hans already fell asleep as he was so tired. Zeke was staring at him and was thinking things. A while ago, while they were on their way, Zeke asked Hans why Florel sided with him so much and what's his relationship to the lady. Hans then honestly told him that his grandmother was Florel's nanny and it might be the reason why Florel has adored him ever since he was young. Zeke then remembered that there was a young servant that his mother especially bullied just because that kid was the grandson of the nanny who raised Lady Florel. Hans becomes annoyed upon hearing it, knowing that it was him. Zeke then asked him if he still remembered his mother, and Hans replied yes and said that Zeke's mother was such a great person. Zeke's mother was kind to those under her and respected those above her. She was a lovely person to everyone. Actually, Zeke was hated by the Count family solely because of his mother. Considering all the wrongdoings his mother committed, he does kind of feel pity for them, for his father Count Bordeaux, for Florel, and for Greg. But then, for him, it doesn't mean he's supposed to be sorry for it. While he was thinking, he suddenly heard the sound of a carriage. He immediately commanded Hans to get up. Hans was still sleepy and told Zeke that it wasn't dawn yet. Zeke then informed him that something was coming their way. Hans immediately moved and asked if it was a goblin or orc. The carriage was already near them. They were just hiding, but Zeke pushed Hans, ordering him to go to the front. "Do you think it's a merchant?" Hans asked, and as per Zeke, the carriage sound wasn't as loud as the sound of the horse's hooves. And if it was a merchant, he believes the shaft horse would pull the wagon, so the sound should be similar. He also concludes that it wasn't a traveler since no traveler would be going around with a carriage at this hour. Both of them were still clueless. The carriage arrived at their temporary camp and outside the carriage were two paladins. Zeke saw them, but he was confused about why there was a paladin in this forest. A lady then got off from the carriage and said, "I apologize for the discourtesy. You see, we want to camp out here for the night as well." Zeke was shocked since the voice was very familiar to him. The lady then said that she's a believer of Karna, Ein Luvella, Karna's saintess. Zeke was staring at her with annoyance as he recalled that Ein Luvella was the one who gave a blessing to the heroes to attack him. He never expected to meet this lady too soon. A man walked towards him and said that he was Wige, serving Ein Luvella, a saintess candidate. Tanzania's killing machine. Zeke uttered, but Wige didn't know what he was saying. They shook hands while Zeke remembered that he told himself he was going to be good in this life, so he was sure it'd be okay to get acquainted with people different from his past life. "I heard you're camping here for the night. Please make yourselves comfortable," he said, and Wige replied, "Thank you. Then, we'll intrude just for the night." Zeke glanced at Hans to give an order, but then, he saw Hans kneeling down in front of Ein Luvella to pay respect and introduce himself. The paladins then prepared a tent, but they were asking for some help. Ein Luvella was about to help the paladins, but someone blacked her and volunteered. It was Hans. He smiled at Ein Luvella and said that he would do it. He then helped the paladins wholeheartedly while Zeke was looking at him, saying that Hans was out of his mind. He glanced at Luvella and understood why Hans acted this way, and that was because Luvella was unrealistically pretty. He then remembered Grand Zenard, the hero who was eager to kill him. He concludes that Zennard only hired beauties. He suddenly laughed while thinking about it without knowing that Luvella was standing in front of him and asked him if she could sit down beside him. Zeke then permitted him and she gave thanks to Zeke. She was staring at the fire in front of them while giving thanks to Zeke once again for permitting them to camp in this area for the night. Luvella was sincerely smiling while Zeke felt awkward that his enemy back then was now sitting beside him. Luvella looked at him upon hearing him ask the reason why she was in this forest. Luvella then answered that she was traveling in order to hear the stories of all kinds of people. She said that whenever she comes across someone in need of help, she gives them prayers of blessing. Zeke then said that what she was doing was amazing, but Luvella disagreed because of the reason that it is something a member of the Carwoodmen should do. She then also asked Zeke why he was here, and Zeke replied that he's trying to find ways to leave as a kind person. He then realizes something. He glanced at Luvella and asked her to tell him how to be a good person. He informed Luvella that someone told him to do more good, but he feels like Luvella is the best person to ask advice from. As per Luvella, there are many ways to be a good person. Is there something you're good at, perhaps? She asked, and Zeke replied that he's good at things that require strength. Luvella then suggested him to use his strength to help those in need. Zeke was happy with her suggestion. He stood then said that he would start looking for some people who were in need by tomorrow. The next day, Luvella and her people arrived at the village of Porty. They then noticed that all the shops were under construction. Wige then excused himself to Luvella to accomplish an order real quick. Luvella permitted him and told him to be careful. She then told the paladins that they should now continue roaming around, but then she heard a scream. She followed it and informed the paladins that she heard someone screaming. Her paladins then volunteered to check it, but then Luvella instantly saw who it was. He saw men in the area and one of them was beaten up. The paladin then told these men to stop and Luvella was surprised to see someone. It was Zeke, and Zeke was the man who beat the other man. After the commotion, Luvella brings Zeke with them and tells him that she told him last night to help those in need and not help those bad people. Zeke then casually said that those people looked like they needed help. That's not all there is to it. Make sure to save only those who are weak from now on, instead of being violent toward good people, Luvella said. She then ordered Zeke to apologize to the man he beat up. But then, the man said he was fine. He then introduced his name, which is Sud, and he gave thanks to Luvella for saving him. He suddenly flinched the moment he heard Luvella asking him what really happened. According to Sud, the Siren trading house demanded him to hand over his shop and bribe the mayor with astronomical amounts of money. He believes that those people see his shop as an old one, but then he cannot just give it since it is so important to him, since the shop was full of memories with his grandfather. So he told them that he couldn't give up his rights to it. He cried and said that he didn't know what to do from now on. Luvella touched his hand and told him not to worry. She said that she would go meet the mayor of Porty right now to help him. The paladin interfered, reminding her that the Carwoodmen cannot get involved in politics. But then, Luvella said that he cannot ignore this as someone who's receiving the teachings of Lady Karna. I'll resolve this. Leave it to me, she confidently said and left. The paladins then chase her, leaving Zeke in confusion. The next day, Zeke was still thinking about the last day. Hans then notices that Zeke looks mad and Zeke explains that he feels like Luvella was mistaken for saying to help the weak. But for Hans, Zeke is the mistaken one. Zeke suddenly squeezes Hans's cheeks while saying that he is concerned because Luvella and her people didn't come back yesterday. While walking, they saw a crowd staring at the poster stuck on the wall. The people said that it was an urgent wanted order. Zeke and Hans then checked it out and heard the people that the person on the poster killed the vice mayor. Zeke was shocked upon seeing Luvella's face on the poster with her name and the crime she had committed. Hans gasps upon seeing the lady's image on the poster. Zeke at the same time senses something suspicious. A witch from Carwoodmen. How horrendous, the lady in the crowd uttered. The crowd also blamed Luvella for why their whole city is now in a mess. Someone then uttered, the sun's setting now, so we should get back quickly, before we run into them. Zeke was curious about whose them the crowd was referring to. Everyone then ran back inside their houses and looked like they were in fear. Everyone closed their windows and pulled their kids inside their homes. Hans was nervous upon seeing the people panicked. He asked Zeke about what's happening, but Zeke doesn't know either. But he was sure that something was definitely off, so he told Hans that they must get going too and just hide for now. They then headed back to their inn and saw no one. Hans was keeping his head shook, checking the surroundings as he was afraid, thinking that someone might attack them. At the same time, Zeke wondered if there was this kind of incident back then before he regressed. But he was really sure that none of this had happened before. Neither the curse of Porty nor Luvella killing someone. He then concludes that things might have changed because he met Luvella. While he was thinking, Hans suddenly held his hand and informed him that there was someone following them behind. This isn't a human but a monster. Hans looked at it and he screamed in fear the moment the monster roared. He moved backward and uttered that it was an undead. Without any words, Zeke slashed its head in front of Hans. The undead's head dropped on the ground near Hans while Hans wondered why there was an undead in Porty. Exactly, I don't feel good about this, Zeke replied. After killing the undead, 2 men came and were glad that nobody got hurt. He then informed Zeke and Hans that they'll get rid of the corpse. They handed one torch to Hans while instructing them to go back and hide before the witch's curse struck them. The 2 men then left with the undead corpse, and Hans then asked Zeke if he really believed that Luvella was a witch. Zeke then answered no, as he was sure that the culprit behind this incident framed Luvella for it. How are you sure she's been framed? Hans asked. Zeke was about to answer, but he didn't continue it. Hans then concludes that Zeke knows something that he doesn't. Zeke then lies that it's written all over the face of Luvella that she's really a kind person. Zeke suddenly senses something. He turned around and saw something running at a fast speed. Hans then also turned around, but Zeke suddenly ran to follow the person he saw. He ran as fast as he could until he reached the person. What are you doing here in that filthy state? He asked. Hans at the same time was dumbfounded upon seeing Luvella sitting on the ground and was very dirty. She was also crying and it seemed like she escaped. Zeke then brings her to their inn and lets her wear his clothes. As she came out after taking a bath, Hans wasn't around, but Zeke informed her that Hans only went outside to buy some food for dinner and would be back soon. Luvella then sat down and Zeke asked her where's the paladins. Luvella suddenly felt sad and Zeke asked her to answer. Luvella then started crying and blamed herself for what happened. Zeke then showed her the poster and Luvella instantly said that she wasn't a witch. Zeke then said that he knew it and he was not one of those people who believed that she was a witch. Luvella was more surprised to hear that Zeke believed her than the others. Zeke then said that it is because Luvella isn't the one who would do something evil. He then told the lady to tell him the truth about what happened to her on the day they parted ways. According to Luvella, as they parted ways, she went to the mayor's mansion and the conversation went well. Unlike the greedy-looking mayor, the dependable vice mayor said that he would take matters into his own hands. The vice mayor whispered to the mayor, suggesting to serve dinner for their visitors. The mayor seemed to realize how inhospitable he had been and prepared a dinner for Luvella and her companions. Luvella wanted to turn down the offer, but then everyone was hungry, so he accepted the offer. The paladins eat so much and seeing them enjoying the meal makes Luvella so happy. Now, she blamed herself for visiting the mayor so suddenly. After dinner, they went to thank the mayor. But as she arrived, she was shocked to witness that the vice mayor and his comrades were killed by the mayor. The mayor saw her and the paladins. He then said that Luvella had seen what she wasn't supposed to. The paladins, including Luvella, were dumbfounded the moment they saw the statue of Val floating above, covered with a purple flame. Luvella then realizes that the mayor turned out to be a puppet of Val. The mayor then laughed, knowing that it takes so much time for Luvella to notice it. What are you trying to do? Luvella asked. At the same time, the corpses of the men that the mayor killed float, and he proudly answered that he is sacrificing these people, and also Luvella and the 2 paladins to the great Val. He was holding a book, then ordered the corpses to attack Luvella, and the paladins then fought back to save the lady. They were using armor, but Luvella believes that there's a big chance they would be defeated, knowing that they were outnumbered. Luvella witnessed how the paladins fought to save her. She was so puzzled behind them. One paladin asked her if she was fine, but then he also saw a corpse heading towards the lady. Luvella saw it, but the paladin grabbed her shoulder and pushed her away. In the end, he was the one who was killed by the corpse. While recalling it, Luvella was so down. Is this the same Val I'm thinking of? Zeke asked. And Luvella answered, I think so. That kind of people had a cult that desired destruction and chaos, and they worshipped the evil god Val. They also regularly commit murder and terrorism. Luvella was guessing that these people might want to carry out a ritual in the city of Porty. She saw an inscription on the statue behind the mayor, and it said, I offer this city to Val. Zeke then concludes that the mayor is trying to offer the entire city as a sacrifice. Luvella asked if he knew more about it, and Zeke answered yes. He believes that that kind of people would set up Val's statue all over the city and offer the corpses of people up to the statue. He believes that the book the mayor was holding is probably the catalyst for activating the power of the statues. Luvella agreed and said that she tried to ask the Carwoodman Temple for help after escaping the mansion, but she was unable to do so because the city is under lockdown. She cried again and said that she wanted to stop the ritual. She was surprised when she heard Zeke offered help to her. Zeke wanted to help as he knew that was a good deed. Luvella then said that she was worried that Zeke would get himself into danger doing this, but Zeke confidently said that it wouldn't happen. He stood and headed back to his room while informing Luvella that they'd leave for the mayor's mansion tomorrow night. He was about to go out, but as he opened the door, he saw Hans outside. Hans was stuttering while saying that he wasn't trying to eavesdrop or anything. Perfect timing. There's something you must do, Zeke said, which made Hans nervous. Zeke then whispered to him the things he needed to do. The next day, they headed back to the mansion as Zeke told Luvella. Zeke beats up the mansion guards and temporarily knocks them out. Zeke was at the branch of the tree and jumped to the terrace to enter. He was carrying Luvella like a bride and he asked the lady if she was fine. The lady then answered yes, and they both entered the mansion silently. They directly went to the mayor's office, and as per Luvella, this is where Val's statue was. While standing outside the door, Zeke feels unpleasant. He then opened the door and instantly saw the mayor covered with a purple flame. "Is that Baldy the mayor?" Zeke asked, and Luvella answered yes and confidently said that this Baldy man was the man who killed the vice mayor. Zeke then grabbed his sword and charged at the mayor. He aimed his sword at the mayor's neck from behind, but the mayor wasn't moving. Zeke feels something. "Be careful, Sir Zeke. Who knows when he'll summon undead," Luvella said. Zeke pushed the mayor's back and told the lady that she was mistaken. He was confident that the mayor was not behind this cult. Luvella was confused, and then she felt the familiar aura. The aura came from the other person who was now holding the catalyst book. "Found him. That's the culprit," Zeke uttered with a smile on his face. The man he was referring to was standing in front of them with the book. The man's posture is very familiar despite that he is in the dark. "I didn't expect you to come back on your own," the man said while walking. Shockingly, it was the vice mayor after all. Luvella was shocked since she thought that the vice mayor already passed away. She was now confused. She stared at the book that the vice mayor was holding and concluded that this book contained the energy of Val. The vice mayor then said that the book's official name is the key to the sacrifice ritual. At this time, Zeke finally understood everything. He deduces that the mayor must have been unwillingly following someone else's orders before his death. He wasn't Val's henchman but was only a puppet of the vice mayor. While listening to his conclusion, the vice mayor smiled since everything Zeke said was right. On the other hand, Luvella cannot believe what she discovered from Zeke. "What about the paladins? What did you do to them?" she asked. The vice mayor laughed and told her not to worry. He said that he ground up each and every one of their corpses and threw them as food for the fish. Luvella was scared upon hearing it since she was hoping that her paladins were still alive. "Who is that man? Is he like Carwoodman's secret protection force?" the vice mayor asked, and he was referring to Zeke. Zeke then replied, stating that he didn't have any connection to Carwoodman. The vice mayor then asked what his purpose of coming to this place. Then Zeke answered that he don't think someone that believes in a damned fish needs to know his reasons. The vice mayor felt insulted, but Zeke teased him more. "You're dying to be punished by Val, aren't you?" the vice mayor said with a clenched fist. Zeke cleaned his ear to continuously tease the vice mayor, and he said that he doesn't take punishment from some damn fish. The vice mayor then screamed that he would make Zeke repent to Val in sheer pain before having him killed. He then used the catalyst book to activate the power of Val's statue. He managed to summon the corpses, and he commanded them all to kill Zeke while letting Luvella alive as he was planning to use her. The corpses he summoned then charged at Zeke, and Luvella immediately activated her magic power and gave a blessing to Zeke. Because of her blessing, Zeke's power becomes strong. His eyes sparkled, and he easily dodged the corpses' attack and was able to attack them back. He attacked them one by one with just his sword, and seeing him easily fought makes the vice mayor confused as he cannot believe how Zeke was able to make it. In the end, Zeke took down the undead in just a short span of time. From the red color, Zeke's mana becomes azure. This time, he feels that some of his magic is back. "Is that it? Aren't you going to call more monsters?" he asked. "You can act arrogant all you want. It's useless anyway. The preparations for the ritual have already been completed," the vice mayor replied. But then, he was shocked the moment he heard Zeke confidently say that he didn't think the ritual preparation had been completed. That is because he found and destroyed all the statues of Val and Porty. As per Zeke, if a cleric of Carwoodman were to take special action on the statue, the ritual's strength could be decreased. The vice mayor was so furious at Zeke for knowing everything. Luvella was also surprised and asked Zeke if everything he said was true. Zeke answered yes and informed the lady that after destroying all the statues in port, all he had to do was come and destroy the last one, which was this one inside the mayor's office. The vice mayor was stuttering and trembling. He then summoned corpses once again and ordered them all to catch Zeke alive. Zeke then gripped his sword and spun it. He was able to kill the corpses, and both the vice mayor and Luvella were shocked. Zeke smiled at the lady and held her shoulder. Luvella uttered his name, but he didn't allow the lady to talk and told her not to move so she won't get hurt. He carried the lady like a bride for the second time while informing her that they were now going to get out of the mansion. Luvella then informed him that the entrance was already blocked since there were other corpses summoned by the vice mayor. Zeke didn't respond and immediately headed to the window. The lady tried to stop him, but he didn't listen. He then jumped and made sure that the lady was safe. The vice mayor was staring out the window and then said that both Zeke and Luvella dared to escape from him. The next day, another poster was released. The news said that Luvella, a witch, had killed the mayor. In this poster, Zeke's image was imprinted. Everyone was shocked by the news as they could not believe that Luvella would also kill the mayor. In addition, they also wondered about the man in the poster. Since they didn't know who it was, they concluded that it was the witch's henchman. Zeke was hiding in a cloak so that nobody won't attack him because of the news. The same goes for Luvella. They were both staring at the poster and Zeke still had the guts to smile while saying that he was still so good looking no matter how the vice mayor drew him. Luvella then said that the vice mayor must have seen Zeke's face for being able to create a news with Zeke's face. Zeke then assumed and added that the vice mayor was also lazy for not doing it right. Stop worrying and eat instead. We have to get moving soon, he said while throwing away the poster he was holding. The lady then asked where he got food and he answered that he only borrowed it from the vendor. Luvella was dumbfounded as she concluded that Zeke had stolen it. Zeke then reasoned out that he couldn't buy the bread given the situation they were in right now. Luvella sat down and was so sad knowing that Zeke still stole the bread. Zeke then told her not to be upset as he believed that what he did wasn't stealing. Luvella decides not to argue with Zeke since she believes she cannot make Zeke admit his mistake. Zeke then informed her that he had written down all the places he had taken things from. Shouldn't that require the owner's agreement? Luvella asked. It's unrealistic to so strictly adhere to the rules of society. But what if I were to pay them back double? Zeke replied. Luvella then decided to change the topic. She asked about Hans' whereabouts and as per Zeke, he sent Hans on an errand. Luvella then feels relief as she was worried about Hans for not seeing her since last night as he saw the face of Hans who was nervous the moment Zeke whispered something to him. According to Zeke, they now need to find the hidden Val statues around the village. Luvella then asked if there was a way to find the statues, and as per Zeke, they would go first to the slums as he had a rough idea of where the statues could be hidden. At the same time, in an abandoned warehouse in Porty, the men from before who beat up the merchant, Sud, together with Zeke were in this area. They were very silent not until someone called them. It was Zeke together with Luvella. These men also believe that Luvella is a witch and that Zeke is the witch's puppet. They were all scared so they immediately ran to escape. Zeke immediately jumped above them and blocked their way while asking them what was wrong with them. Do you think I'm going to kill you or something? He added. The two men were terrified and Zeke then held them on their clothes behind. Luvella was staring at them and recalled that these men were the ones who beat up the merchant, Sud, with Zeke. Zeke then turned his head around and shouted to the other man who managed to escape, asking him if he didn't have loyalty to his friends. The man feels guilty upon hearing it. That reason do you have as criminals to be out in public like this? He asked. Zeke then told him not to worry about them and that all he wanted was for these three men to help them look for someone. He let go of the men and added that he'll pay handsomely for it. He was holding a large sum and the three men were tempted. Zeke then said that he would give this money as long as they would answer his questions. The three men then asked him what his questions were. First is, if there have been any humans who fell ill or suddenly died lately, as if they just lost all their life energy. The two men are clueless and they both stare at their other friend who seems like has an idea. But then, this man won't tell the truth. Zeke was annoyed since these men acting unnice even if he already offered them money. He strangled the man for him to say anything but the man still said that he didn't know anything. This time, Luvella kneeled down and begged. Zeke was shocked that the lady would go this far just for this city. Luvella then informed the men that the city of Forty was in great danger right now, and at this rate, it might become a city of death. She also informed them that there were already undead going around in the night and there might be more horrible things that would happen. Be serious. It's because of your guys that there are undead here. The man angrily screamed. He really believed about the news circulating and he was blaming Luvella for what happened to their city. He said that if it was not because of Luvella, his brother wouldn't be in the state he is in right now. Upon hearing it, Zeke smiled as he assumed that the person they were looking for was this man's brother. The man didn't answer and Zeke then ordered him to guide them to his home where his brother could be found. The man refused and Zeke was so annoyed this time. He forcibly pulled the man to guide them and told Luvella to follow. After a few minutes, they arrived at one of the houses in a slum area. The three were sitting beside the sick man. Luvella was using her healing skill and did all she could, but the man won't recover unless they find the sources of his illness. Zeke then asked the young man, Timmy, if there was someone who approached his brother lately. Then Timmy replied yes and said that he saw them with his own eyes. It was him, Timmy added. And Zeke asked who? Don't you remember? That bastard from before. The merchant you helped us beat up, said. It's that bastard's doing. Timmy replied with anger. Luvella believes that the said Timmy referring to was the one she was helping. Timmy then said she was right and blamed Luvella for everything that happened. He was so mad at Luvella, but Zeke asked him to calm down and say everything that happened in detail. Timmy was clenching his fist out of anger. According to him, he went back later than usual on that day, but his brother wasn't home. His brother is a pretty weak kid, and since they live in a slum without any police officers, he was worried that something might have happened to his brother, so he freaked out. But he saw his brother Georgie and a man was aiming a dagger at Georgie. That man saw him and suddenly ran away when he chased him. He was able to grab the cloak the man was wearing, but he was shocked to see that it was Sud. Sud even smirked at him, and since that day, his brother has been in this condition. He informed Zeke that his brother had no wounds at first and woke up right after, so he thought his brother was fine. But Georgie started getting thinner, saying he didn't have energy and soon fainted like a lifeless person. On the day he meets Zeke, he asks a favor because he is planning on stealing the dagger from Sud. And in exchange for returning the dagger, he wanted to ask Sud to tell him how to treat his brother. Though of course, due to a certain righteous person, it was all crushed to pieces. He uttered, and Luvella knew Timmy was referring to her, so she apologized and admitted that she misunderstood him, as she simply thought a weak person was being beaten up. Why? Because we were one-sidedly attacking him. Or was it because I'm poor? Because I seemed like a thug? Looks like that's all your reasoning for differentiating between the strong and the weak, Timmy stated, which made Luvella speechless. Zeke then clapped his hand and hung his shoulder to Timmy, telling him that Luvella has only lived the life of a noble and doesn't have much experience, so he must understand her. By the way, why don't you hate me? Zeke asked. He was clueless as to why, knowing that he betrayed Timmy after Luvella showed up, so he was expecting that Timmy would hate him. He was waiting for an answer. Timmy was shy as he answered that it was because it was the first time someone offered them help without any condition whatsoever. Zeke was surprised with his answer, as he never expected someone would like him just because he helped them. After their discussion, they then went outside and Zeke immediately asked Luvella's opinion. As per Luvella, he sensed Val's disgusting energy from that sick child instead of a life force. She was pretty sure that Georgie was a sacrifice. She asked Zeke if he figured out a way, and Zeke answered yes. They then went to Sud's shop. Sud was carrying a box as he headed inside. The ground suddenly shook, so he turned his head around, wondering what it was. He then brought a light and went on the underground, but he didn't see anyone, so he concluded it was just a rat. He wasn't aware that someone was standing behind him. It was Zeke, whispering to him, "Long time no see." With the voice, he was sure it was Zeke, the one who beat him. "Let's get you beat up till the very end today. Don't worry about someone interrupting us like they did back then. You see her, right? The heavenly guardian who protected you is back today as an angel of hell," Zeke uttered, then pushed the Sud to the ground. Zeke walks towards Sud while Sud begs him for mercy. He asked Zeke why he did this to him, and Zeke told him that he could find out why if he asked the statue behind him. Since Sud wouldn't answer, Zeke kicked him. "Wait, you don't think I'm a believer of Val, do you?" Sud asked. He confidently said that he wasn't a believer of Val, but Zeke kicked him again and said that Sud isn't a believer but a disgusting bastard who clings to those guys from Val, hoping to get some breadcrumbs. Sud was suffering because of the heavy foot of Zeke on his back. Luvella feels pity for Sud, and she was shocked the moment she saw Zeke unleash his dagger. Zeke then told her that they didn't need Sud now that they had found the Val statue. Val was scared to death, so he decided to speak. Zeke commanded him to continue what he wanted to say, and Sud then said that he knew the place where the other statue was. Zeke beat him up and ordered him to say where it was. Sud smiled to tease him and said that he wouldn't just tell it so easily. Zeke was annoyed at him. Sud then said that if Zeke would put even a finger on his body, he won't say where the other statues are. Zeke stares at him without any emotion. Sud then believes that it is because Zeke now finally understands the situation. "You foolish hooligan. I should have done away with you and those slum bastards much earlier," he stated. Luvella felt sad to know that this was the real attitude of Sud, whom she thought was a good person. Sud then said that Luvella believes that he is still a naive dude. "Stupid bitch. This is why people call you a witch," he uttered. Luvella then asked him why he was doing these bad things if he said he didn't even worship Val. Sud then honestly answered that it was all because of money. He was offered an astronomical amount of money just for imbuing the statue with life force, and he isn't in the state of turning down that kind of offer. He mentioned this time that his shop is now very old and regrets the time he has spent in this rotten place because of his father and grandfather. Now, with the money, he believes he still has a chance to end it all. He told Zeke to let him go and promised to say where the Val statues are once he's out of this place. "Oh, well, what should I do? I've changed my mind." "You're gonna die now," Zeke replied. He was confident that without Sud, he could still find the statues. Zeke lifted him up and angrily stared at him. Sud was so scared and immediately looked at Luvella to ask for help from the lady. He even said that the Carwoodman order was supposed to protect the weak. He told Luvella that he didn't mean what he said earlier. Zeke was staring at Luvella and saw the lady gripping her staff and felt pity for Sud. But then, she knows what's best, so she tells Zeke to kill Sud now. Sud was terrified. Zeke then aimed the dagger at him while he kept on asking for some mercy. Luvella just closed her eyes so she won't see anything. The blood then splattered the moment Zeke stabbed Sud. As she opened her eyes, Zeke was standing in front of her. But she was surprised that Zeke didn't kill Sud. Zeke told Sud to not let himself be seen by him again. Sud was trembling in pain. He was furious at Zeke, but he didn't have the strength to fight back. After dealing with said, both Zeke and Luvella then went into an abandoned house. Luvella was very silent, so Zeke handed him bread and asked her if she was okay. Luvella then replied that she thought she just kept making the wrong judgments. She also didn't deny that she believed the wrong side just based on what she heard about. Zeke was just listening to her as he knew that the lady was really sad about what happened. Luvella then added that she assumed the story about the mayor was made up too. She recalls that Lady Karna always told her that she shouldn't be prejudiced. Are you feeling guilty? I'm fine. I'm fine. You don't need to feel guilty about me too, Zeke said. Luvella apologizes to Zeke and believes that she should ask Zeke for a piece of advice this time. Zeke sat down and ate the bread he was holding while telling Luvella that he didn't have anything original. He doesn't think any advice will comfort Luvella either, so he wants the lady to solve it on her own. Luvella was just listening to him. He also told the lady that no matter what she would do, time still heals all wounds, and blaming herself achieves nothing other than making herself suffer. Because of what he stated, Luvella claimed that he was much more mature than she imagined. Zeke paused and was confused, but the lady said she meant nothing. She then asked Zeke if they're gonna go look for the other statues now. Zeke then answered yes and informed the lady that he thought he knew a place where the statues might be. Luvella feels down again. She apologizes to Zeke as she feels that she's no use at all. What do you mean? You've got the most important role right now, Zeke replied, but Luvella was confused. When the night came, the rain was also pouring. They went back to the mayor's mansion and beat up the guards. Zeke believes that there was another statue in here since there were lots of guards that were hired with money like said. They easily found it, and Zeke then handed Luvella a brush and instructed her to imbue this brush and paint with her holy aura. Luvella then followed his command without any doubt. She activated her holy aura and imbued it with the brush and paint. The process was done easily after a few minutes. Zeke then gives thanks to her and gets the brush to draw something on the statue. Now that he painted it, he was confident that the ritual was over. He then asked Luvella to finish it off, and Luvella then touched the statue with her holy aura. It's done. Do we just leave it be now? She asked, and Zeke answered, yeah, it's fine. The holy aura has already been absorbed. He then walked away, telling the lady that they must keep going. Before leaving, Luvella stares back at the statue, wondering if what they did could really stop the ritual. At the same time, in the mayor's office, the vice mayor was still in this room. He was staring at the poster which had the face of Luvella and Zeke. He was covered with the aura of Val. He let the poster of Luvella float and uttered, "Come to me, Luvella." That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you wish to have another part of this recap, please give us at least 2,000 likes. Please don't forget to comment and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Until next time.